150 sites, each 100 meters apart, with 15 rows and 10 transects. It covers 370 acres, with the idea being that each little grid box is 1 hectare, which is kind of the metric acre. I've been to every corner of this. It's a hike through woods that are not necessarily well traveled. And you right now are right here, if you want to know where we are. The dining hall's about over here. Thank you, Terry. This is doing wonders for my confidence. And the idea is that we don't need to sample every tree in the forest to have a reasonable representation of it. We can just go every 100 meters and sample a little bit of the forest, and that should be representative if we go across space. So what happens at each site? We put an orange stake in the ground at the center of each site. It's geolocated via that map. We put a little bit of flagging up on a tree next to it. And we take basically 3 kinds of data about every site. Maintenance data. Data like that reference flagging so that we can find stakes easier, and we record a little bit of information so that if the stake gets lost or is under snow, we record the angle and distance from a tree nearby so that you can dig it up with a trowel. Much better than guessing randomly. And safety info is also in this category. You'd like to know if the site you're going to has barbed wire or tree fall that might be potentially slightly hazardous, or if under the snow there is a lot of uneven footing. This is for the maintenance of this forest so that it's usable. Next, we record a lot of qualitative data. This is things like canopy cover and forest structure and regeneration. This is useful data for scientists. The intent of this category is not necessarily that you're going to run the stats on it, but if you are, let's say, looking for an oak forest with hemlock in the mid-story, you can look through the notes and go, oh, these 4 sites have that. It just makes this forest easier to use as a researcher. And then the final type of data is inventory data. This is where we're actually sampling trees. And we record the diameter, canopy position, and species of each tree within 5 meters of the center of that site. Got a little string measured to 5 meters and everything. It's a whole deal. And as of right now, we have surveyed 1,486 individual trees of 23 different species, and 96 sites are in the data set, with another 1 or 2 that have yet to be entered so far. That might be a slightly higher number after yesterday. We got 4 sites done. And 0.7% of the land. That doesn't sound like a lot until it's 0.7% of 270 acres. And this has been thousands of work hours, and we have a lot of data. Who wants to see some results?
Oh yeah.
So, I made a copy of the master data sheet with just 5 minutes and sheets. I was able to just put together the species makeup of the entirety of our data set. If you see, there's a lot of American beech. We've got a fair amount of hemlock, and red oak, hawthorn beam, black birch, red maple, yellow birch, white pine, striped maple, paper birch, sugar maple, maple syrup, witch hazel, and white ash are all relatively present, but one stands out here. Anyone want to shout out which one stands out? Beech. Yeah, we have a lot of beech in this forest. And anecdotally, I've seen a lot of beech in the understory, but not a lot of beech in the in the canopy. Beech doesn't seem to get up there all that often. So I've got access to a data set, and I know the canopy position of each of these trees. What about the species composition of canopy trees? Well, hemlock didn't change that much. The species composition of canopy trees is roughly the same for hemlock as all the trees. That means hemlock probably gets up into the canopy at the same rate that's just in our forest. But what happened to beech? I've got an answer for y'all. This is another graph that Laura made that more accurately shows that phenomenon. There is two things being graphed here. One is just the percent of trees in the forest. I graphed it as a pie chart, but this is just as a bar chart. And then basal area, which is if you cut all the trees down, what would be the area of the stumps? We did not cut the trees down to do this, don't worry. And you'll see that a bunch of trees kind of have more basal area percentage than tree percentage. This is because those trees are either early successional trees or they get up into the canopy really effectively. For example, white pine loves growing in open fields and it grows fast. But then the forest grows up around it. So we only have a few white pines really in our forest, but they're all massive. So that makes sense. A similar story with red oak. Hemlock is kind of even, it's just a large part of our forest. And then beech trees. What's up with beech trees? Well, I've been looking into this kind of all year now as part of Laura's class, forest ecology research design, but kind of a mouthful, we call it fern. And beech trees suffer from an invasive disease called beech bark disease. Beech bark disease is an insect that bores into the tree and sips a little sap. That's not what hurts the trees though, because coming in after that insect in this complex disease is a fungus that takes advantage of the little hole in the bark and causes these characteristic cankers on the side of beech trees. Eventually, those cankers will likely girdle and kill pretty much every beech tree in the forest. There's kind of one thing to know about trees is they kind of don't die unless killed. But here's something that's killing all those canopy beech trees. So that's what happened to cause all this beech to leave the canopy. But beech trees fight back. They've got a response. They sprout from their roots. And that's why we see so much beech in the understory. All these canopy trees tried their response mechanism. They sprouted from the roots, but that didn't save them at all. Because why would it? They're still getting girdled, so they fell over. And they left a whole bunch of genetic clones behind. So that's why we see so much beech in the understory and not in the canopy. Going a step further, I wondered if this affected how much carbon beech trees could store. And more critically, how much carbon sites dominated by beech trees could store. This is a pressing question with climate change. This paper from 2000 found that the forestry industry in the US mitigated about 17% of carbon emissions in that year. If anyone's looking for it, I can find it later. I don't have it on hand. But because of this competition from these sprouting roots, you don't get other species that could easily make it up into the canopy doing so, because beech is a wonderful tree. It's just affected by this invasive. So, sites with beech trees store significantly less carbon than sites without beech trees. And my p-value, which is a statistical measure for how significant something is where is it? Right here, is 0.002, where the field standard for significance is below 0.05. This is significant results that I did in this forest. And because of the power of that massive data set I had, I could do this very quickly. All I needed for this study was the heights of trees. I already had their species, I already had their diameters. And I already had their sites, so I could just pull that in really quickly. And that's the power of data and the massive amount we have. It's to narrow in on trends very quickly. And Laura over there is very good at this. She's the one who spearheaded this entire project. She's also an introvert. Please let's welcome her. here, not her. And we can pull a whole lot of data really quickly from this massive data set we've kind of procured and maintained. Biodiversity decreases as the number of trees in a site increase. Sites with less trees in them, more or less, are more biodiverse, have more species. We see here that the number of trees in our forest for each kind of diameter gets smaller as that diameter increases. I remember this tree that is a absolutely the 1.1 meter in diameter tree that is an absolutely massive ash. I forget which site. It's somewhere in what? F9. And it unfortunately is on its way out due to emerald ash borer, which is another invasive. And so this is not surprising at all. Trees tend to die as they get larger and larger. Eventually they'll just fall apart under their own weight. Another graph about beech trees. Is this surprising, given what I just said? How beech trees have a smaller area of the basal area compared to other species? No, it's not. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you, everyone.